Hey guys, this is Danny. Thanks for checking out today's podcast episode. I really appreciate that. Have you ever mustered up the strength and courage to tackle some big, overwhelming project? You're completely excited when all of a sudden you begin to think, where do I even start? Well, in today's episode, I discuss what starting the journey of recovery from life's hurts looks like. I really hope you find a nugget or two of help as you begin your journey. And if you find help in today's episode, please don't forget to share that with someone you know. Okay, let's get started. Well, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. This is Tears to Wells, and I'm your host, Danny Mendez. It's been some time since our last podcast, and I am guilty of getting distracted in life and getting away from what I feel is my calling, and that's to help people find hope and inspiration from the difficulties of their life. Well, one of the things that I want to talk to you about today in this episode is what I've entitled Starting Your Recovery Journey. Last week, or here within the last few days, I have a best friend. He's my brother Alberto. He lives in California. And one of the things that we do often is we call each other probably at least every other day, and sometimes every day for a week at a stretch or what have you. But one of the things that we talk, I think people, when they look at us talk, they're so amazed at the fact of how well we go back and forth, our banter. Even when we have quote unquote arguments, we are very civil when we quote unquote fight and so forth. And there's many reasons for that. I think the way we grew up, we're kind of battle buddies, so to speak, from a dysfunctional home that we grew up in and stuff like that. But to be frank with you, I think the real reason that we get along so well is that we've both made a commitment to growth and recovery. Somewhere along the lines, we both figured out that because of our past, because of our upbringing, we have needed to learn new skills, new ways of approaching life. And I think the wonderful thing is that both of us made this commitment to recovery, this commitment to going on the journey, if you will. So I want to talk to you today about how did that start? I can't talk for my brother. I can't speak for my brother Albert, how his journey started, but I can speak for myself. How did my journey start on the path to recovery? Well, it's very popular these days to talk about the connection between trauma and difficulties from your childhood and the present as an adult. It's a theme that you hear a lot about. You hear it in the pop culture. You definitely see it on social media, the books that are being put out, the self-help kind of material that's out there. It is a given today that your past or your childhood or your adolescence has an effect on your present. But 30 years ago, that wasn't the case. 30 years ago, a lot of people still did not make that connection. It could be a lot of different reasons. One of the things I believe is the people in charge, so to speak, were the silent generation or even the older baby boomers. And a lot of them just really dealt with their past by burying it and then just moving forward. And so they didn't really teach on how your past and your upbringing really has a bearing or makes an impact on your present. But my journey begins where most recoveries from emotional wounds begin, and that's when life starts to become too difficult to manage and what you've been doing isn't working. That's kind of where my journey started. Life just became too difficult to manage. And again, as far back as I can remember, I've been a committed Christian. I still am a committed believer. I believe in Jesus Christ and I believe in the Word of God. And I had always been practicing the Christian faith. But even with being involved in church and being with learning the Scripture and even applying Scripture to my life, so much of my life had become unmanageable and for lack of a better term, it just wasn't working. And so I really had to become introspective, and I had to realize there's something more to this. In college, I really struggled with incredibly low self-esteem. I had this inner dialogue that just over and over just beat me down and kept talking about how bad I was or just how dumb I was. And the running conversation literally was a beatdown every day that I was giving myself. In college, I probably had very real very few real connections. I had a lot of friends. I've always had a gregarious personality. I've always been jovial, and I had an unlimited amount of friends, but very real connections I had few. And that's one of the things that I desired. And one of the things that I think everyone desires is deep, meaningful connections. And I had few of those. I was extremely overweight. Here I was at this college where a lot of young men and young women were meeting and dating, and some were getting engaged and even married. And here I was severely overweight and just didn't feel good about myself. I didn't know how to completely express what was going on, but I struggled with extreme anxiety. I can remember some of the basic things that people just did on a regular basis were very much filled with anxiety, and I can remember just going into the snack shop at our college where everybody went to get their little evening dessert or snack or what have you. I would go in there and see all the people in the crowds and just become overwhelmed and scared and get my food and go directly into my room, which really caused another problem was with isolation. And so that brought on depression. And then I had this sense of being lost. So a lot of different things were going on when I was in college, and they were leading to this unmanageable life. And so one of the things that connected with me or resonated with me, I thought all of this is probably stemming. Again, I had no life coach. I had no direction. I kind of was just doing all of this on my own. So I started thinking, why are all these things happening? Or why is it that you can't connect? And in my mind, I just kind of said to myself, well, it's because you're overweight. So one of the things I did, I really clamped down and got in good shape. I started running, I started eating right, and I lost an incredible amount of weight in my second or third year of college, and really got down to a regular body weight, which to be frank with you, I don't remember being an average body weight all the way back until I was a child. But what I found out, even after I lost all the weight, is that I was still a mess inside. I was just anxious. I still struggled with depression, not as much with depression because I was exercising and eating right and so forth, but I still struggled with all these hangups and different things. So I knew that there was much more to the problem. I knew there was a little bit more to what was going on than just the weight. It wasn't till later that I was able to connect the weight with the trauma and the abuse, the neglect, and we'll talk about that in coming episodes. But I stumbled across, through a series of different events, I stumbled across two books that really, really helped me. The first book was a book by the title Unfinished Business, Helping Adults Resolve Their Past by Charles Sell. And I won't get into all the details, but I was listening to a radio broadcast, and the man on the broadcast was kind of detailing his life and all of the struggles and hangups that he had, and it resonated with me because I immediately thought, well, that's me. Exactly what that guy's going through. That's what I'm going through. And so he recommended a book that he had just written. I went to the library and looked for it. Couldn't find it, but I found another book, and it was providential because this book, Unfinished Business, was actually written from a Christian perspective, and it's one of the things I enjoy. I enjoy books written more with a biblical worldview. But as I read the book, I saw all of the different things that happen to adults that come from homes of an alcoholic or homes that have been touched by alcoholism. It's one of the things that affected the first 6 to 7 years of my life very deeply. My mom was a binge alcoholic, and so she consumed great amounts of alcohol and took it out on us and so forth. I did not make the connection that was now affecting me as an adult, and it was. The second book that really made an impact on me was I'd had this awakening by reading this first book, and now started to connect the pieces. And I kind of checked in with a mentor I had at college and mentioned it to him. He said, there's a guy that you need to talk to and need to meet and let him talk to you, because he struggled with a little bit the same issues. And he introduced me to a man named Dr. John Olson at our college, and what a wonderful man he was. But as we talked, John said, here's the book you really, really need to read. And it was a book by the title Healing for Damaged Emotions by David Seamans. And in this book, Healing for Damaged Emotions, I don't remember all of the material. It was a great book. I remember the main thing that came across from the book was hope. But as I read the book, one of the things that stood out was the author talked about when you cut down these huge, I think they're called redwoods. They're in this, or maybe they're in the Sequoia National Park, or maybe I got it the other way around. It's sequoia trees in the Redwood National Park. I don't know. But anyway, when you cut these trees down, inside these trees are rings that go around the center of the trunk, and each ring stands for a year, is what I was told. But as you read those rings, you could tell by either the size of the ring or the shape of the ring, if it was rings that were years that were filled with a lot of drought or a lot of heat. Maybe there was years there were a lot of storms and a lot of bad weather. Maybe there was times of beautiful sunshine and health. He said you can almost read the history of that tree by reading the rings. And he made the analogy, if a tree keeps the score in the trunk and you can see what has happened in the life of the tree, don't you think that bodies are the same way? As we come into adulthood, a lot of the things that we have happened to us in our past carry with us on into the future. And I made that connection. And so for the first time, I understood the connection between, let me give you some of the things that happened to us. I understood the connection between no father and having no father as a child, how that was now affecting me in some shape or way as an adult. I understood that though my mom was doing the best she could with the tools that she had, she was a very abusive person, physically, mentally, emotionally. Every day from the time I was a child to the time literally that I left for college, there was some form of abuse in that home. And so now as an adult, I was understanding that this was having an impact on me. An alcoholic stepfather, even though my mom had come to faith in Christ and had become a committed Christian, and our home did make a complete turnaround, and we'll talk about that maybe in future episodes. My stepfather, the man she married, was an alcoholic, and that brought a lot of baggage and chaos and so forth to the home, and so that was now affecting me as an adult. And then, of course, growing up in a controlling church environment, and again, I don't want to get sidetracked, and I don't want to raise other issues, and we'll talk about these in further podcasts. But the church environment I grew up was very, very controlling, and a lot of that was affecting me now as an adult. So what happens when you make that connection? This is what I hope happens for you, maybe through this podcast or through you exploring your journey. The very first thing that happens when you make the connection that your past and that your trauma and that your difficulties may be impacting you today in this current moment, I think the very first thing that happens when you make that connection, it gives you hope. It helps you understand, okay, there's a reason why this is happening. And if there's a reason why this is happening, well, maybe I can get help, or maybe I can also find the tools that I need to make this better. And so definitely that happened. That's what happened to me. Through these two books, I understood, okay, there's hope. If I understand how this happened, then I'm sure I can read and explore and find out how to fix this or how to change this. So that was the very first thing that happened to me, and I'm hoping that's what happens to you. I'm hoping that you find hope, that you experience that sense of relief. Okay, I'm not crazy. Okay, I'm not this weird creature, this weird animal. So I'm hoping that's what happens to you. But immediately after I went through hope, the very next thing that happens after you make the connection between your past and your present, at least in my experience, and it happened to me, is you'll come into grief immediately. And I want to warn you of that, because a lot of people they're on self-help journeys, but it's just they want to improve, but they don't understand how they got here or what happened to them. But if you ever make the connection, one of the things that I'm warning you may happen is you may go into a period of grief. Let me explain to you what that felt like for me. First of all, I understood that portions of my childhood were taken away from me. Childhood for most people should be times of being carefree, indulgent in fun. Yes, being taught and so forth and learning character, but it should be a time where you are totally protected and you can be vulnerable and learn about life, learn who you are, learn what life is all about. Well, when you figure out that was taken from you, you go into a period of grief and you're very sad about it. I realized that portions of my youth were taken away from me because these hangups followed me into youth. These hangups that were formed in my childhood now followed me to youth, and it seemed like my youth in many ways was taken away from me. Later in life, as I followed a mentor that was what we would call a, maybe not necessarily a toxic person, but definitely a hurting, wounded person, and followed him and learned many good traits, but also many bad traits. And when I came to that reality, also there was a feeling of grief. And of course, grief has several stages. And so I'm warning you that the very first step of grief is anger. After sadness, after this sadness that you've experienced this loss, you get into anger. You're mad. You're angry at the people who abused you. You're angry at the people who took from you. You're angry at the people who upended your life. So I'm kind of warning you that when you make that connection, be aware of this. But of course, when you go through grief, if you go through grief the proper way, eventually you'll end up at significance. You'll understand that as bad as the situation was and as horrible as the situation was, it happened. It really happened. But now what good can you make out of it? Or what good can you bring from it? And that's really the whole reason for this podcast, Tears to Wells. It's my way of finding significance from the abuse and the abandonment and neglect. I've taken these issues now and said, okay, it happened. It's happened to me and it's really changed my life and changed who I am. What can I do with it? Part of it is doing a podcast like this and bringing significance and helping others. But then what also happens after you make that connection is, yes, you have a sense of relief. Yes, you may go into grief, but you'll then face a choice. You'll face a choice. You'll either choose bitterness and be on that path of bitterness and anger and stay on that, or you'll choose forgiveness and significance. And I'm really hoping that you choose forgiveness, because really it's the only way to move forward. A person that chooses bitterness and anger is a person who's going to be stuck. And what will happen is you'll just continue to waste time. You'll continue to waste years, which will cause more grief. And literally you'll be doubling down the rest of your life. So I really hope you'll choose forgiveness. But then the last thing that will happen when you make that connection is you'll have to get to work. And that's really what happened 30 years ago with me. I understood, okay, there's some things that have happened to me that have given me some hangups. They've given me some problems, some, the buzzword when I was growing up, issues, baggage, whatever you want to call it. Now I can look at that and just kind of sit on my backside and say, there's nothing I can do. But that's not the case. The case now is, what's my responsibility in this end? Yes, these abusers damaged and hurt me and may have even caused some of these problems that I have in my life, but what's my responsibility? And so now my responsibility is to get to work. And so that's what I believe you'll have to come to as you start this journey. So how do you start the journey? So how do you start the journey to recovery? And that's what I want to spend the rest of our time together on. How do you start the journey? The first step in starting the journey to recovery, after you've kind of gone through your grief and after you've made peace with what has happened, and after you've chosen forgiveness and you realize, I got to get to work here, the very first thing as you start on your journey is you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself. I want to ask you today, are your hangups and habits interfering with your life? Are they coming to the place where they are getting in the way of meaningful relationships? And you have to be honest with yourself. Many of us begin to look at problems in our life with relationships, and we blame others and we blame that person. It's getting to the point where every time there's an issue, it's always the other person, or it's always the system, or it's my boss. But we have to be honest sometimes with ourselves and asking, are my hangups and my habits, my worldview, the way I look at things, are they getting in the way or interfering with my life? Are they keeping you from getting what you want? Are they getting in the ways of getting your goals? There's many of us that we have aspirations, we have dreams, we have goals that we want to attain. But it seems like our hangups, our habits, our way of dealing with others, are prone to isolation, is getting in the way of getting what we want. And you have to be honest with yourself. We have to be honest with ourselves with what is the real state of my life, not what I'm being told reality is. And that's part of the problem. One of the reasons it's so difficult to start recovery is many of us are still in dysfunctional systems, dysfunctional homes, dysfunctional relationships. And so part of that is what I've learned is called unconscious contracts. Sometimes we make contracts with people and it's never verbalized, it's never expressed, but we make these unconscious contracts. And part of it is there's certain things we don't talk about. There's certain things we don't say. And so what that causes us to do is it gives us a skewed view of reality. And if we're going to start our journey to recovery, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest with ourselves and ask this simple question: what is reality? Not what I'm being told reality is. Many of us are being told, you're happy. You're happy because I'm telling you you're happy. But deep down inside, we know we're not happy. We're not fulfilled. We're not meeting our potential. And so the path to recovery starts with being honest with ourselves. Which pain do you want? You have to be honest with yourself about that. Do you want the pain of your present or the pain of change? You got to be honest with yourself. You have to come to the place where you say, there's going to be two pains involved here. Staying where I'm at is painful. Change is going to be painful, but I want the pain that comes with change because it brings the potential for greater fulfillment, greater satisfaction, more meaningful relationships. And then you have to ask and be honest with yourself about this. What's my responsibility in recovery? What's my responsibility in recovery? It's so easy. And I'm guilty of it. And again, I don't ever want to give the impression that I have all the answers. I'm simply sharing my journey with you in the hopes that it will help. One of the things that you'll always have to do is be honest. Like, what is your responsibility in recovery? I understand what was done to me. I understand the abuse, the violence. I understand the neglect. I understand being taken advantage of. Now, these cause some hurts. What's my responsibility in the issue? And so sometimes it's my responsibility to go get help. Sometimes it's my responsibility to make some changes. Sometimes it's my responsibility to seek out new experiences, new friends, new relationships. But that's the first thing you'll need if you're good on this path to starting your journey of recovery. The very first thing you need is to be honest with yourself. The second thing you're going to need is to understand your new best friends. On this road to recovery, there are some new best friends that you need to embrace, and you need to realize these are your best buddies on this path. The first one is truth. As you start into your journey of recovery, one of the things you're going to learn a lot is in dysfunctional homes, abusive homes, homes where people have been victimized, there is a lot of deceit, a lot of lying. There's just a lot of lies. For instance, in an alcoholic's home, everybody knows dad has a problem, or everybody knows mom has a problem, but we lie about it. They're just not available, or they just have a little problem with liquor every now and then. We tell all these lies. And one of the things that we get good at is telling lies to ourselves. But what we're going to find on this new journey of recovery, we're going to find that the truth is our best friend. It is always our best friend. 30 years ago, when I first started this journey, I'm going to be quite frank with you, because of my past and because of the way I grew up, there was a lot of lies. I had no problem lying about certain things, and I had made that association for some reason, and of course, we can analyze this all day long, but I made that connection of, if you don't want to get hurt, don't tell the truth, because it always seems like when I was honest, or when you told the truth, you got hit or you got spanked or you got bullied. So from a youngster, I made the connection: truth equals hurt. And so my first few years of recovery, or recovering from the hurts and hangups of life, was really turning that around and realizing truth is the best. You're never going to recover until you start embracing the truth. The second thing that you need to understand is your best friend is, I'm going to say education, but I really mean educating yourself. That is your best friend. Your best friend is going to be books and videos and podcasts and YouTube videos and reaching out and networking, support groups, different things where you're learning. One of the things that I've done, and it's sometimes it's a little frustrating because you do so much learning and growing, and then it's like peeling back an onion. You just uncover a whole new layer that needs to be addressed. But it's okay. I've learned it's okay. When I find new layers of stuff that I need to address in my life, it's my first reaction is it's okay. You just got to deal with it. You got to learn about it. You got to read about it. So I just want to challenge you. Your second best friend, not the first one is truth. The second one is educating yourself. Go to the library. Get every book you can. And I just want to warn you, and this is like a side note, as you learn, it's going to keep opening your eyes, and it'll cause problems in some ways, because many people are not going to like the new person that's coming out. And again, that's a whole different episode, but I'm just warning you, your best friend needs to be educating yourself and learning, and don't be afraid. Keep exploring, keep learning. The third one, your third best friend, the first one is truth. The second one is educating yourself. The third one is professionals. Professionals are going to be support. Support is the best friend there. And what do I mean by support? I found the best support for me as I've been on this journey of recovery are friends, first close personal friends. Now, when you're unhealthy, as I was when I first started this journey, a good portion of my friends were unhealthy. Now, I had some good friends and good and healthy emotionally and healthy spiritually friends, but I also attracted a lot of dysfunctional people in my life. And so one of the first things that's going to happen is you need to kind of sift through your friends and find the ones that are encouraging growth, encouraging this new you, this new version of you. Find those friends. If you have one of those, what a great gift. And I know this word gets probably overused, and by many Christians don't, for some reason, I don't know why they don't like this term, but friends that are non-judgmental, they're not judging you, they embrace you. I have a few friends that I absolutely adore being around. I've got plenty of friends, but there's a handful of them I love, because the minute I step in their presence, I feel like they're not looking for every fault in my life. They're not looking to judge me. They're not looking to condemn me. They truly just love being around me, Danny Mendez, the person. And if you can find those friends, hang around those friends, because you will need their support on this journey of recovery. You need that. The second thing you're going to need are cohorts, what I call cohorts for support. And cohorts are other people that are committed to growth and recovery. And usually they're going to be other people just like you that have experienced hurt, they've experienced pain, and they've made a commitment. You usually find cohorts in groups, recovery groups, church help groups, different places, people that are just like you that have struggled and know what it is to struggle. You're going to need people like that. And then the last people that I'm putting down as support are professionals, those who know what happened and can help. And that's kind of where I'm at. And it's actually one of the places where I've been stuck a little bit, is because I've not taken enough time to really find professionals. I think I've done, like a mechanic, a lot of tinkering, and there's a few areas of my life that require some specialized attention, and maybe that's the next level for me. But what I'm saying, that your second path, your second step on the path to recovery is understanding your best friends, and that's truth, educating yourself, and then support. Thirdly, what's the third step on the path to recovery? Now that you've made the connection between your past and the present, how it's affecting you today. Honesty is your first step. Secondly, is finding your new best friends. Thirdly, it's seeking the help of God. Now, we could have put that first. That's fine. But for lack of teaching and explaining, the third thing is seeking the help of God. Seeking the help of God. Every recovery program that is of consequence or beneficial, almost every one of those programs encourages the people in those programs to find a higher power, without exception. There's some great work that has recently come out by some incredible people, people that I'm reading and following. And one of the things that they show that has the best effect on people in recovery is a relationship with God. Now, we know that people, people all over the world have different faiths and different religion. For me, I believe that when we say higher power, for me, I call my higher power God the Father, Jesus Christ. That's who I believe is the authority in my life, and I believe that through the Word of God. Now, again, I don't want to get into the religious aspects of this, but many who will listen to this podcast, maybe you're not a believer and you don't believe, but I encourage you to understand that on this pathway to recovery, we need help that's greater than ourselves. We will never be able to pull ourselves out of the mess that we are in, and we need that appeal to a higher power. In my life, I found that whenever I hit a wall in my recovery, when I just couldn't break through because of my habits or because of viewpoints or issues, and I didn't know what to do next, I found that my Father, my God, has always guided me when I asked and when I cried out for mercy. When I always cried out for his help, he connected me with the right person. He connected me to the right church. He connected me to the right group. He connected me to the right book. He explained to me the right scripture. So this is essential. This is essential on this path to recovery. And so I want to say this too, that and again, because so many people who struggle with mental health and recovery and these issues, life gets too much for us sometimes, and we come to places in our life where we just think, I can't go any further. And many people even sadly consider suicide and ending their life. But I want to say this, and I am a testimony of this. When I've come to the place where I just thought, there's no more, there's no reason to keep going forward. When I've cried out for mercy to my Father, to my God, it seemed like that mercy kicked in and the rain shut off, the storm shut off just enough to get some strength and get some recovery. The right people came at the right time to help. And so I want to encourage you today to understand this concept on your journey to recovery is seeking the help of God. The next thing on our journey of recovery, and we've covered 3 so far, but the next thing is be patient, don't stop. Be patient, don't stop. This is going to be a lifelong project. One of the things I read recently, and it brought mixed emotions to me, is many people who have suffered tremendous abuse and tremendous hurt struggle with different forms of PTSD or CPTSD. Many of these issues, they say, are incurable, can never be cured. I don't know about that. I'm not an expert. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. And I haven't explored it enough to say one way or the other. I just know in my own life, this has been a 30-year journey. It's been a lifelong project. I'm so glad that somewhere along the line I understood, as the Bible says, this is not a work of a day or two. This is a lifelong project. And you're going to get a lot better. And you're going to get better than where you're at right now. But you need to be patient with yourself and realize that I'll be working on myself and I'll be working on these issues my entire life. And there's not a problem with that. There's not a problem with that. Don't stop when you're frustrated. Man, when you're frustrated and the negative self-talk starts kicking in and you keep saying to yourself, I'll never get better. I'll never be the person I want to be. When you get to that place, keep going. Keep going on this journey of recovery. Keep going to the support groups. Keep reading, keep exploring, keep crying out to God, keep going to church, keep looking for other healthy people. Don't give up. But then also, don't give up when you become successful. Because what's going to happen on this journey to recovery, you're going to learn different strategies, techniques, different things about yourself to get better, better, and better, and better. And one of the things that kicks in is we look in the mirror and we look like, hey, I've arrived. I've recovered. And we stop. We stop looking for support in our groups and stepping out of isolation. We stop seeking God. We stop being proactive in learning and gaining new material. And so when that happens, we go right back into bad habits and spiral back to where we're from. So I want to encourage you, be patient and don't stop. And then finally, the last step on the road to recovery, the last step is simply this. And we could have started with this because the last step is this: just start. Just start. Stop waiting for a sign. Stop waiting for things to get worse. Just start. Pick an entry point and jump in. Pick an entry point and jump in. What are some entry points that you can start with? You can start with just going down to your local library or looking on the internet and finding a good book to start with. I gave you two of them today in today's podcast: Unfinished Business and Healing for Emotional Wounds. Two great books to start with. I call them primers. You can prime and learn a little bit about how your past affects your present. So a good book is a good way to start it. Find a mentor. Find someone who's maybe had the same struggles that you have or that you've experienced, and you look at their life and you'd say, that seems like a great life I'd like to have, and I'd be okay if 20 years from now my life looked like that. Find that person to mentor you and guide you. It's important to choose good mentors and good guides, and especially making sure they are healthy, emotionally healthy. And one of the things that you're going to find, I still struggle with this, when you've come from a dysfunctional and a difficult past, sometimes your people picker is off a little bit, and you find yourself sometimes consistently and habitually picking the wrong people. But ask the Lord to help you find the right mentor to guide you. Pick a support group. Find a good place. Maybe I'll do a whole podcast on this, but for a season, I went to a support group called Celebrate Recovery. I went to that support group just to be around other people that were broken and hurting. And boy, they convalesced, helped me convalesce and get me to a place of strength. But find a support group that deals with whatever hang up or issue that you're having. If you're dealing with addiction, there are addiction support groups. If you're dealing with certain hang-ups, there's different groups that help deal with it. There's codependency issues. If there's eating issues, whatever your issues are, find maybe a support group. You might consider finding a life coach, maybe a coach. One of the things that I'm experiencing on my journey is almost every successful person that I've heard give a talk will somehow or another bring up a life coach. And it's something that's kind of staring at me, and I'm just encouraging you to do that. And then finally, and I don't want to leave it to last, I don't mean to minimize its importance, maybe a therapist. Maybe a therapist is a good place to start and kind of help make this connection. So I'm going to end today just kind of giving you the overview of what we talked about today. I talked about today, sometimes we don't make that connection between how our past is affecting us in our present. And when we do make that connection, it launches a series of feelings, emotions, everything from guilt to anger, remorse, all these things. But as we process those emotions, as we finally make that connection, we have a decision to make. Do we live in bitterness? Do we live stuck? Or do we choose to forgive and move forward? And when we choose to move forward, the next question is, how do I move forward? And I gave you some today. First of all, be honest with yourself. Start being honest about who you are, your situation, what's going on, what you need to do. Understand your new best friends. We talked about the truth and educating yourself and so forth. Seek the help of God. He's your rock and your anchor and your guide on this journey to recovery. Be patient. Don't stop. And then finally, just start. Start somewhere. It might have just started today with this podcast. So thanks for joining me today. Thanks for listening to my testimony on this journey. Again, as I mentioned, I use this podcast as a vehicle to share my heart and share my experience and really share the 30 years that I've spent in recovery, recovering from the hurts and the hangups and the issues of life. Am I where I want to be? No. I still have a lot of room to grow, but I definitely thank God that I am not today where I could be. I could be a lot worse. I could be dead from the habits that were modeled to me and the way of life, but only through the mercy of God has He shifted me and showed me there's a better way. And that's what I want to get across to you. There's a better way. There is this journey of recovery that you can start today. Well, we're doing this together. And so thanks a lot for joining me on Tears to Wells. We'll try to put a new podcast out there, a new episode every week, and look forward to seeing you then. All right. God bless you.